We learned a lot in week 7 of the summer 22 season, but one thing's for sure that a team can win twice in one night. And of course, it starts with that first game for the Ozone boys, is who we're talking about, as they take down Lob City in an upset that I don't think anybody really saw coming, especially without Andrew Kavang there for the Ozone boys. And they still get the win, shake things up, and now it gets very interesting heading into that final week of the regular season. Welcome to the Week 7 post-game show. Tim and Aidan are standing by. Cade may or may not be joining us. We'll see if he pops on as we're going along. But let's start there. I know Aidan was over on court one. The Ozone boys take down Lob City by 6. They had a 5, 6, 7-point lead, with like 2 minutes to go. So it's not like that, it was in that range, and they made some plays down the stretch in the fourth quarter to get it, a double-digit lead. And then Lob City had to foul. They would have had to hit some shots, and it didn't happen down the stretch. We'll go right to Aidan. What happened? And then we'll get to the playoff stuff after. So let's break down the matchups. Then we'll look ahead with one game left, kind of what that win means. I know we're going to talk about it along the way anyway, but let's talk about the game in week 7 first and focus there. What did Ozone do to get the win that no one really saw coming?
I just think, like you said, they were without Andrew, which was a little tough for them because he was their second option on the scoring when they came in with the second unit, and they've been starting both the Hogan brothers at the same time, and both teams shot very, very poorly. I think both around the 33, 36 range. So the shots weren't falling for either team, but it was just a complete defensive effort. It just, like Paul McGuire at 21, he did his own thing. But I just think Ozone, they started 0-3. They're now 3-4, right? Or something along those lines, 3-4. So they've won 3 of their last 4. And I just think they're playing completely, like we've said before. You don't want to see them in the playoffs, and they're not going to be 0-3 for longer. They figured out how they play well as a team and how they play off of each other. And Eric Eason doesn't play much, but when he comes in, even though he doesn't score a lot, he gives a lot of defensive effort. Zach Brooks shined. And again, I just think they were able to lock down Lob City, which is really odd for me to say because Lob only scored 48 points. That might be the lowest they've ever scored. I'm not really sure. But great defense and just poor shooting from both teams that led to whatever team was going to take the lead in the final quarter and just run with it at that point.
Yeah, and so we're going to look at Lob City in a second. Before we get to their side of things, the Ozone boys have improved to 3-4. This was their second win. We're going to get to their third win on the season, which also took place in week 7 in 1 second. Definitely shout out Zach Brooks. I know he had a couple huge shots down the stretch, as we were talking about, as they were able to get it to that double-digit lead or even just keep it close as the team started to go back and forth in that fourth quarter. Looking at Lob City, their second loss. I believe it's their second loss in 3 weeks, thanks to the halfway Crooks, right? The halfway Crooks are their one win in the past 3 weeks. But again, playing the Duje's boys, that's, stats are stats, but sometimes, it doesn't always tell the real story. But for Lob City, we were saying it last week, and if we didn't, I know he listened, so it's going to make things interesting. Are they better without Jose? Do they play more as a team? Having Victor against the halfway Crooks definitely helps. So maybe it's more having Victor than not having Jose, right? But we'll go back to Aidan. What, we talked about the shooting, right? You see it there, 36% and then 18% from 3. Was it just that? Was it not having, Victor there on defense? And not that he hasn't played in every game, so that's not their excuse and they're out in this one. But, what was it that Lob City was unable to do or unable to force the Ozone boys to do?
They were just unable to score, and that's again odd for me to say for Lob City, but like poor shooting too. Usually Greg Holt doesn't shoot that many shots, doesn't miss that many shots, but I just think without Jose, they have to find that main scoring option. And yes, Cody's going to be that main scoring option, and Colin's going to be the number 2, but they need to find someone else that can also score. And Carly always there, but he leaves at halftime to go do his other thing, and he plays an impact. But I just think they were unable to shoot the ball well. They always shot it well. Like we've talked about the percentage, and it's gonna keep coming up to that. But they were unable to make their shots, and I think it was the pressure from Ozone that because they were playing them all hard, and they didn't have Victor like you said this week, and he brings a lot to the table defensively. Hasn't played in many games, but he has that energy, And one thing I noticed too is Lob City wasn't really talking a lot while they were on the court, and they always talk. They talked a little bit, but it wasn't as vocal as they always are, and it just seemed like they weren't in it this week, which is again odd for me to say. And I just think tough loss, and they're gonna hopefully bounce back in the last week of the season and get the win.
Yeah, do we know who they play? I don't know why it's slipping me. Their last game. We'll get there. They and I know we'll get to it in 1 second, but they now fall to 5-2, and that opens the door for two other teams who also are 5-2 through week 7. The Rhode Island Warriors. We'll get there in a second, but I think it's the Werewolves as well. And let's get to the Werewolves and halfway Crooks game, another close game. But it's the Werewolves who improved to 5-2. They are 6-4 all time against the halfway Crooks and have won the last 4. But in this one, you know, they like to reference the article for their motivation last week. So thanks a lot for that, Aidan. And we'll let Tim, get in on this one. I know we're doing some court 1 action. We'll get over to court 3 in a second. But when Sam Clifford's there, and I think it's what we talked about, if not on the post game, but I think we did definitely on the Low Post podcast. We've mentioned this. It brings back Dave Campbell, Brian Heston vibes from past seasons where Sam Clifford is able to give him that legitimate second scoring option, which allows Brian Heston, if he has an off night like he did, which won't happen often, but realistically, they're both going to be able to play off each other and carry that team. We're going to find out how far in the playoffs, right? But now the Werewolves in a 3-way tie for second with the Warriors and Lob City. Thanks to their week 7 win, we'll go back to Aidan first. They had all their guys. I think all they have is 6 guys, and they were all there. The halfway Crooks didn't have all their guys, but Dylan Lincoln's missing in action, so he's done. And Mark Belleville's on vacation, so that leaves me playing a ton of minutes. Not a great sign, but unless it's against only the fam, and I will continue to throw that dig out there because a near triple double is a near triple double. But Aidan, for the Werewolves, they snuck it out, and it was double digits, so let's give them credit. The lead was up to double digits, and then that fourth quarter happened. But what did the Werewolves do to get that 5th win?
It was the Sam Clifford show. It looked like every shot he was taking was gonna fall regardless, and he played like effortlessly. And that's the first time I've seen him play, and he hasn't played many games. But when they have a whole cohesive unit, and I believe they do only have 6 guys, but when they have that rotation in, and that allows Brian to be able to sit some minutes and not play the whole game where he usually has to play the whole game and he's always scoring. And he didn't have a great night because Sam was just doing it all, and they pick up the pieces where they need to be. And it just, like I said, it was the Sam Clifford show. That's what it was. Some great defensive plays too, like a really kind of close game. Like you said, it was 10 points at once, but it didn't feel like that. It felt like Werewolves hit a shot, halfway hit a shot. Werewolves, they were trading buckets, and Sam shooting 12 of 17, the rest of them not great, but it shows that even if Gino and Heston and even Connor doesn't play well as a unit, if Sam comes in off the bench, and even if Joe scores a lot too, they're able to score. But they were just, again, Sam Clifford show. He had some acrobatic finishes and just was his own game, really. And the halfway Crooks couldn't do much about it.
I'm laughing because I scrolled down and I don't think you could see Tim, but I think his eyes lit up when he saw some of the shooting numbers for the Werewolves. And if not, I'm using it anyway, because that could be the reaction when you see a box score like that. I mean, not to, Brian Heston going 4 of 16, again, like I talked about, isn't going to happen very often. A couple of blocks in there by Jeff Winchell, shout out, for his doing all he could on defense. But Sam Clifford was like, all right, well, you guys are going to focus on Heston, then I will step in and lead the team with 34 points. Tim, I know you weren't on this one, but even just talking about these two teams, or even kind of what it means that going forward, like I talked about, the Werewolves in a really good position now, and the halfway Crooks fall to 3-4, now tied with the Ozone boys after everything they did in week 7. So we'll kind of throw it to Tim, even on these two teams. They may meet again in the playoffs, but what are you looking out of these two teams going forward?
Yeah, so with these two teams right now, what I'm seeing is like two teams going in like totally opposite directions. Like the Werewolves, I believe they have won 3 straight. They've been playing great ball. Obviously, when they have Clifford, that adds a different element to their team. Heston's really the guy that does everything for them, but when they have a guy that can put up 34 that shows up every now and then, I mean, that's not a lot of thing that a lot of teams can offer. But I would just say the Crooks, they probably have to shoot the three better. We underestimate, I think, a little bit 3-point shooting in this league. It's an 8.5-foot rim, so a lot of people like to go to the rim, but if you can shoot well, 3 points is more than two. So if they can improve there, I think the Crooks will be all right playoff time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, 4 for 23, I believe I just saw. Not going to cut it for the halfway Crooks. And I was going to say, it felt like Sam Clifford made 4 by himself. He was 3 of 3 from 3, right? So efficient scoring from him, the inability to hit the 3-point shot for the halfway Crooks. So we already mentioned those guys. Just to, of course, I pretend to do my homework, but Lob City takes on Sin City in week 8. So that's going to be, again, it's going to have some seeding implications as we get there. Let's do the Ozone boys getting their 3rd win. I know we're going to talk a lot about them, but might as well get it out of the way. That's the closest game I believe Court 3 saw, and it is in week 7. So the Ozone boys take down the Lincoln 18ers in the nightcap 72-69. And they had, I posted the clip today, there was a 3-point chance, some controversy in the comments. I saw it happen live, and live is different when you have the video and you're able to go, you're able to scroll through and the refs don't have replay. But it's, we don't even have to get into it. It's when the ref calls the ball out. It was close, and unfortunately I've seen worse calls end the game. So they wanted a second on the clock. The ref was right on top of it. That's how the game ends. A blocked 3-point shot for the Lincoln 18ers. That means the Ozone boys, like we talked about, improved to 3 and 4. We'll go to Tim. I mean, both teams played 2 games, so we can kind of focus on Lincoln a little more here, but that's not easy or fun. And they were still throwing down dunks, and so they're all those 2 teams are on the younger side anyway. They're made for that. But what did the Ozone boys do, Tim? I mean, especially in that second game, that impressed you, and again gives you that hope, right? One of those teams trending upward as we head to the playoffs.
Yeah, so for the Ozone boys this game, I mean, to me, it was obvious to tell they were a little tired. This was their second game, I think. If maybe they come in and this is their first game, the score's a little different, but that's not to take really anything away from Lincoln. Obviously, you see Ethan Cloutier with a very impressive game. If you look at his first game, I believe he went 0 of 10 on 3, so you would be pretty surprised to see this result, but he was shooting well. Also, Mike Hamilton, he's actually been shooting it well all year. He's over 50% on the year from 3. This Lincoln team has showed time and time again that they can shoot the ball, and I think they need to maybe show more Stephen Ritchie, give him a little more opportunity, because he made a lot of deep threes. He was able to get in the paint, put up some floaters. He has good touch. If they give him more minutes, I think it would be good for them. But for the Ozone boys, obviously you see Kavang was hot from 3, 4 for 8, pretty good percentage. Paul McGuire and Zach Brooks, though, down the stretch were the difference makers. Big and 1 from Zach Brooks down the stretch, clutch free throws. Paul McGuire, as we know, had a great game 1. In game 2, he continued it, going to the basket, isolating, finding plays for his teammates. Yeah, I think it's good for Ozone boys to get these 2 wins, build on momentum. They should feel confident going into next week.
Yeah, and so I know we talked a lot about Ozone boys and even not so much about the Lincoln 18ers. We're going to get to their first game, but the second game, we're talking about them in a second. The Lincoln 18ers do fall after both of those games to 1 and 6 in the 9 seed. And they are stuck in the 9 seed. So, because they lost to only the Fam, who's in front of them, but they beat Bogy Kicks. So no matter what happens, they're the 9 seed. They'll take on the 8 seed, which is also locked into only the Fam. So that won't happen in week 8, but in the playoffs, it will be only the Fam and Lincoln 18ers. So we can preview that. We have plenty of time to look ahead to that one. But the Lincoln 18ers, I mean, they were right there in that second game. In their first game, I know it was closer until the fourth quarter, and we can even head there now and kind of continue talking about the Lincoln 18ers against the Rhode Island Warriors. In that first game, like I talked about, 98-78 was the final score. That was the Warriors getting their 5th win on the season. I believe another 50-point performance by Gian Avendisian. So there you go for that. And even just some of the highlights, you would think Lincoln was playing in their second game first from what I saw, and their first game was the second game. I mean, Tim saw more of it than I did, so I'm going to turn it over to him. That's how it looked to me, as far as like, I don't like using the effort word because that isn't always the nicest way to put it, but it kind of seemed like, all right, like we kind of want to win this second one, like almost like they believed more in winning the second one. But they do come up short. And Tim, I believe it was close until the fourth quarter, but you tell me. They even had a lead. Pretty sure they were battling with the Warriors.
Yeah, so a little bit about what it's funny you say that, because Lincoln, they had Ryan Musket for the second game, so they actually had a sub. This game they didn't have a sub. Also, another tidbit about this game, the Lincoln 18ers did not call a timeout the entire game. I don't know if they forgot they had them, but I think that really showed in the fourth quarter, like really showed, because they shot really well. Mike Hamilton, like I said, shooting the lights out. Also, probably one of the more underrated players in the league is Jason Madwed. He doesn't show up every time, but he's really fundamental. You see, he fills up the stat sheet, rebounding, playmaking for his team. He's really good in the post, and he can either score in the post or he can facilitate out of the post if they're sending doubles. Also, that diamond zone for Lincoln, it gave the Warriors trouble in the first three quarters. Lincoln, as you can see, they're actually up 4 entering the fourth. So this game could have gone either way, but yeah, the fourth quarter was just basically Warriors steal, transition, and it basically just got out of hand at that point. Gian, another big game. Charles Correa, definitely a key X factor for this team. If he plays like this, he already had a player of the week a couple weeks ago. More performances like this. Amini also, he showed up in like the third quarter, so that's why his stats weren't really like that. But yeah, I would like to see the Warriors get more contributions out of anyone but Gian, just because it's hard to rely on that every game. But it has been working for them so far. So good win for the Warriors.
Yeah, for sure. And you talked about it. So we mentioned with the Werewolves, right? If they get Sam Clifford going, there's that 1-2 punch on offense. I mean, that possibly more so applies to the Warriors, right? With Gian and Charles there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even that good at math. 82 of their 98, right? That's, the Werewolves have done that. When the Werewolves were in the finals, I remember looking at that box score, and it was Dave Campbell and Heston, I think, had all but 4 of something ridiculous like that. So the Werewolves have competed with this level of like 2 players doing all the scoring, and not that other people on that team aren't capable, but when you have those 2 options, it frees up players 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? And that goes for both of those teams. So good win for the Warriors to pull away. Gian made sure in his interview, I'm like famous apparently. I know I am famous, but the second week in a row he mentioned me because I'm talking my shit on the post game. Need to win by more points, so they'll be moving up in the power rankings. That's for sure. The power rankings are more to kind of stir the pot a little bit. That's why they're fun. But the standings are what they are, and the Warriors get that 5th win. So now again they're in a 3-way tie with Lob City and the Werewolves. We looked it up prior. The Warriors lost. What did we say? Oh, we were previewing stuff. That's why I'm getting confused. We were saying if Sin City is able to win, so I guess we'll kind of get there in a second when we get down the road. But if Sin City is able to hand Lob City a loss, they fall to 5-3. If Duje's boys does in fact beat the Werewolves in week 8, again, we're assuming a lot with that matchup because both of those teams are really good. Werewolves would fall to 5-3, and if the Warriors can win, they would be the lone team through the regular season with 2 losses and can get that 2 seed. Tiebreakers get tricky, but in that scenario, it's easy. They're the only team in that case that would have 2 losses through 8 weeks. So the 2 seed is still available for them. And the team, did we do Duje's yet? I don't think so, right? Is that the one I was saving? Great. What a transition. The team that's locked up the 1 seed. So they don't even got to worry about none of this crap. And they had it locked up prior to, them even taking the court tonight. So they knew if they win, they clinched because they'd beaten Lob City and it would be a 1-game difference in the standings, but they would have the tiebreaker. With that Ozone boys win over Lob City, Duje's boys were there watching and they were like, thanks. Thanks to our, they even said it on Twitter, thanks to the younger boys or something like that, to the other, the other boy team for, taking care of their business and clinching the 1 seed for them. They clinched it themselves with their play this season, but mathematically it was taken care of heading into that matchup. And then we had a good one The 25-point spread set prior by Duje's boys themselves. And then it was a 7-point Duje's boys win. I don't remember if Bogy had a lead in the fourth quarter. I know they played it close throughout. And I know they weren't leading heading into the fourth quarter. But let me turn that off. But yeah, Duje's boys do get the win. Again, improved to 7-0, stay undefeated. Bogy Kicks still 0-7, looking for that first win. But it seems like every week are getting closer to that first win. And so, guys, we'll go to Aidan on this one for the Duje's boys recap. Then we'll go back to Core 3. Then we'll preview some Week 8 and playoff stuff. So for the Duje's boys, was it shooting? And I would like to look at that first. I think I was expecting, and not that it's easy to stop David DePina, right? I mean, their offense seemed to be either he drove for Bogy Kicks or someone else on Bogy shot it, and he was already camped out ready for the rebound and would turn it into a jump ball. And he's, a very good athlete, so he's good at that and would get the jump ball and score. And so that kind of eliminates someone actually guarding David DePina in that scenario, right? Because we know Duje's boys have the defenders. But what was it, the key part of this game? And then what did the Duje's boys do to pull away?
So the key part in this game is there was a lot of trash talking from both sides. I'm not going to touch on what it was, but a lot of talking between both sides. And I think that's what got into their heads. And I think that's why Duje's, it was a really close game. Like throughout, you can just look at the box score right there for each quarter. Very close game. I don't know. I really don't know what happened. I think what kind of happened in the beginning was Vinny had some quick fouls and he wasn't able to be on the court. So they had to just rely on Brian and John to get the job done, which is totally fine. John had a great night. Brian didn't have a really good night shooting, but made up for the free throws. And David DePina, it seemed like every time he was going into the paint, he was dunking on everybody. And they were playing defense too, but it was just the Duje's boys were able to play how they wanted to play, but it wasn't a cohesive unit. Like we said, shooting percentages, if you just look at this, Duje shot fairly decent, just all the players. But I think they got into each other's heads, and Duje's was expecting an easy matchup, like they sent the 25.5-point spread. But Bogy Kicks came out to play, and they've shown a lot of flashes of decent play in not the majority, but in some of their recent games. And maybe it's just David DePina taking over, but Mike Evans on Bogy Kicks, you see, had 23, but he didn't shoot very well. He's very much the facilitator on that team. He gets to talking, and they have some decent players, but again, they're not going to win a game in this league this year. I mean, if they come back next year, but it was just a lot of trash talking, I think, and got into each other's heads, and they weren't able to just knock down the shots, and Duje's were able to knock down more shots than them, which is ultimately what led them to winning, I believe.
Not to cut off, the Duje's boys, chatter, because we're going to be talking about them for, throughout the playoffs, I'm sure, if not for a couple games. Mentioned Bogy Kicks not getting a win, and I understand why you're saying that. But taking on, they would get the 7. All right, so if they get the halfway Crooks or the Ozone boys, I was talking about the Lincoln 18ers. I thought Bogy was going to play only the fam, and I was like, well, this is not bash only the fam, but basketball wise, maybe. But they won't play each other in the playoffs unless things get very weird. But even taking on the Ozone boys, where I know they've played, but it was back and forth, or even the halfway Crooks in that sense. They're not a team, Shane said it in his interview, right? They're not a team you can look past, even though they haven't won a game. And so it'll be interesting to see who they get in that 10-7 matchup, because they are locked in as the 10 seed, Bogy Kicks I'm talking about, at 0-7, regardless of what happens in Week 8. As far as that 7 seed, it is between the Ozone boys and halfway Crooks, like we talked about. We'll, explain more on that in a second, but let's get to the last game of the night that we haven't touched on yet. Speaking of that, only the fam team taking on Sin City, just based on lack of size alone. I think the result, at least what team won, was pretty predictable, as Sin City takes care of business, by 39. That may not have been the part that we predicted as well. But 102-63 it is Sin City, and a huge second quarter for them. We'll let Tim touch on them. I mean, this is a team, right? So Sin City improves to 4-3, like we talked about. If things get messy, I don't know if they can be a 2 seed. I think a lot would have to happen for that. But 3 seeds in play. We've already touched on that scenario, and we can recap that in a second. 3 seeds in play if some stuff gets wacky in week 8 for Sin City after I think they started 0-2, right? And they were trying to figure stuff out, and they're above 500, right? So 4-3 and a dangerous team. We talked about how did they get the win and take care of business in week 7.
So if you look at Sin City, like over the course of the season, they have 3 losses. In all 3 of those games, they've pretty much been in the games like through 3 quarters. So we've seen at times that games slip away from them, but what stands out right away in this one was Devin Pina's stat line, triple-double, almost 30-30. We saw Jeff Winchell with a similar stat line against Oli and the Fam couple weeks ago. So I guess if you're just a big man against only the Fam, you're licking your chops. But I think this was pretty much a wire-to-wire blowout. Sin City, when they lock in on defense, they're really hard to score on. Taj really stops the point of attack at the top of the key, and you got Devin Pina, and when they have Javon Morris down low, it's kind of hard to take him to the basket. As we know, only the Fam is a team that really relies on their 3-point shooting. Because they don't go to the basket a lot. So, and they shot 20%, so they didn't really have a shot in this one if they're shooting that poorly. Jaren puts up 20 again. He pretty much has to carry that load for them. We've seen that the whole year. Tucker Aiello, not a great shooting night for him. They need more from him if they're going to be able to compete. Same with Mike Bartholomew. But I think this should be good for Sin City, just for them not to worry about a game in the fourth quarter for once. They actually got to relax and enjoy a win. And I think they have a good chance to beat Lob next week. We'll see.
Okay. All right. The tease by Tim. Drop Mike, dropping the mic. He's out. All right. All right, Tim. All right. Well, we know what he's going to pick. Let me get the standings up here. So those are the 6 week 7 matchups. All right. And so now we take a look at the standings. I know I've talked about them throughout, but it's much easier to see it in front of you. If you're watching us on video, I'll rip through them for the podcast audio listeners. But we talked about the Duje's boys 7-0. They've clinched the 1 seed with 1 game remaining. They clinched it with 2 of their games remaining because of Ozone beating Lob City in week 7. Lob City, the Warriors, and the Werewolves currently all sit at 5-2. These standings don't reflect tiebreakers. I'm sorry about that. We'll have to do that manually after, but those teams all have the same record. Now we'll talk about who they play in week 8 and then what that could mean for their record after week 8. But currently those 3 teams, Lob City, the Warriors, and the Werewolves, all tied at 5-2, tied for second. Sin City alone as the 5 seed at 4-3. If they lose, then they could be 4-4, and the 6 or the 7 seed currently, the Ozone boys or the halfway Crooks, could win, improve to 4-4, and then be in a battle for that 5 seed. So that's kind of still in play for Ozone and the halfway Crooks. Their max or their ceiling would be a 5 in that case. I can kind of do some of that stuff in a second too, like the ceiling and the floor for some of these teams. If things go one way or another, then I'll let you guys almost do some predicting on what you think will happen. So if you guys want to pull up the week 8 schedule, YouTube, while I finish this up. Ozone boys and the halfway Crooks tied for 6th at 3-4. Only the Fam, like we talked about, locked up the 8 seed because they lost to the halfway Crooks to beat the Lincoln 18ers below them. So no matter what happens, that's where they stay, the 8 seed. They're currently 2-5. The Lincoln 18ers at 1-6. Again, that is locked in because of who they've beaten and played. And Bogy kicks 0-7. Even if they get a win, will still be that 10 seed and will play in the first round. So again, the 7 plays the 10, the 8 plays the 9, and then we go into traditional kind of like March Madness numbers there, where the 1 will take on the winner of the 8-9, the 2 seed takes on the winner of the 7-10, the 3 seed takes on the 6 seed, and the 4 seed takes on the 5 seed. So Duje's boys are the 1. Lob City can stay at the 2 if they win and the tiebreaker goes their way. Lob City can fall as low as the 4 seed, like we talked about, I believe, because of some of the tiebreakers, and they've beaten so many teams. So the 4 or 5 seed is their floor. And in either scenario, that would put them on the same side of the bracket as Duje's boys, which would mean a semifinal matchup if some things fall that way for Lob City and the Duje's boys. That is still in play. The Warriors, like we talked about, if they win and some other teams lose, can get up to the 2 seed. The farthest they can fall would be the 4, I believe. Because even if they're 5-3, did they beat Sin City? This is where it's nice to have the schedule handy. The Warriors, I believe they beat Sin City. Yep, you can see it right there in week 5. So the lowest they can go is the 4 seed. Even if they were tied, they would have the tiebreaker. So the Warriors will be between 2 and 4. The Werewolves, same thing. I guess if things get wacky, they can climb up to the 2 seed technically. They beat Sin City. We checked, didn't we? I think they beat them by a couple. This is great on the spot analysis here for you guys. What we do. Werewolves, Bogy. They may not have, no, they played. We'll figure it out later. They can be either the 2 seed or be the 4 or 5 seed. I apologize for not having my crap together, but that's all right. Aidan, do you have it?
Sin City actually beat the Werewolves
Okay,
by 15.
cool. So
week
that means,
2.
thank you. So that means the Werewolves could fall to 5. There you go. So if things all go that way, they could fall below Sin City. The Ozone boys max again would be 5. Same with the halfway Crooks if some things fall that way. And their lowest either of those teams can go in the Ozone boys or the halfway Crooks would be the 7. And that gets important because if you're the 7 seed, you'd have to win a game against Bogy Kicks and then play the 2 seed, whoever that would be, that same night. So there's the disadvantage for falling to 7. All right. That's a lot of talking. I apologize if it was a little fast, but the standings are up on the screen. They're on the site as well. We'll be back with the post-game show. We'll have the bracket out prior to the post-game show next week, as that is the last game of the regular season. So, guys, we'll go to Tim. I think we'll go to Tim first, either way. Well, he just did a mic drop moment, so we have to go back to him as fast as we can. What do you see happening, Tim? Even if you want to focus on the top, you can kind of pick a matchup. I mean, Sin City takes on Lob City. The Warriors take on Only the Fam. Werewolves, Duje's boys. Halfway Crooks, Lincoln. So you don't have to predict every matchup, but what's your most likely outcome, for week 8? And what does that mean for the playoffs in your mind?
Yeah, so I kind of already dropped the ball on this, but I have a big upset this week, and it's Sin City over Lob City. It's not, it's not really like I'm down on Lob City after they lost to Ozone, but I think if Jose is not there, they're definitely a different team, and I think they'll struggle dealing with Devin Pena down low. I know Colin Burns is going to do his job down there, but Devin's putting up numbers against anyone. And also, this one's going to be a little more shocking, but I have the Werewolves beating Duje's boys for their first loss of the season. I just think it's not the best matchup for Duje's, although Duje's, with their small lineup, has showed they can defend any big in this league, but they have not faced Brian Heston yet this year. So I'm interested to see also if Sam Clifford shows up. I think those two will be a handful for Duje's to deal with, but I think that one will definitely go down to the wire.
All right, I like it. We can even let Aidan jump in and pick both of those games as well. But just taking that scenario, if we go back to the standings, right? If Lob City was to lose, meaning Sin City was to win in that case, that would put Sin City at 5-3, Lob City at 5-3. We can assume Tim can head nod. That would mean the Warriors would win next week in your scenario against Only the Fam. That's a yes. So in that case, if Sin City does win, nothing else matters. Once the Warriors win, they would be that 2 seed in Tim's world. That would then leave us with a tie between Sin City. He had the Werewolves winning. So there you go. Right? Yeah, the Werewolves winning. So I lied. So it would come down to Warriors, Werewolves, and I don't know if they played. So I lied. It would be Warriors and Werewolves fighting for the 2 seed. We don't have to go 2. It's okay. It's a hypothetical scenario anyway. But that would leave the Warriors and Werewolves for the 2-3. And because of just wins and losses, that would put Lob City and Sin City, like we talked about before the podcast, Tim, in the 4-5, and Sin City would have just have beaten Lob City in week 8. And so in Tim's scenario, one more loss and then other things happen, and Lob City can be the 5 seed after all that of, being top in the power rankings throughout the season and everything. So that's how quickly things can change. Aidan, you want to pick some of those games, and then we'll try to not mess up your hypothetical the way I just butchered Tim's standings. Go ahead.
That's okay. One thing about Lob City and Sin City is I believe if people watched the interview after with Devin Pina, I don't think he's going to be there next week. So that's going to be tougher for them. So again, still a tough matchup. It's all up in the air because that's what he said in the interview. Who knows? He might show up, whatever. I would still. Oh, that's tough. If Pina shows up, no, I still think I have to go with Lob, even without Jose. I think they're coming off, not back-to-back losses, but 2 losses in the last 3 weeks, which I don't know if that's ever happened to them. So I think they kind of want the win more, maybe. But it's going to be a great game regardless. And like you said, Werewolves, Duje's boys, I think I'm going to have to agree with Tim on that. I will pick the Werewolves over the Duje's boys. Like Tim said, they haven't played them yet. They played them before, rivalry team. They're back and forth. But it's a different ball game when Sam Clifford's there, and he's the 1-2 punch, like we said. So I still will pick that. And I think another easy matchup, which I believe could, if the Lob City does win, which would happen maybe, but the Warriors versus Only the Fam, that's going to give them their 6th win. I know I'm predicting. I don't like to do that, but I would I would believe that they would beat Only the Fam. So that would give them their 6th win alone on top of the standings if Lob were to lose, which could happen. But it's an interesting games next week, and some really big implications for the first round of the playoffs.
All I would like to say is that is karma for Tim doing a drop the mic moment, in his last segment. Now he's going to predict a Sin City win and didn't even do his homework that Devon Pina may not be there. I'll bet against him in that. I mean, whatever the odds are, I'll take it. I'll take Lob City, and in that matchup, he's so confident over there. But yeah, so in Aidan's scenario there, Lob City getting the win, they would improve to 6-2. The Warriors in that scenario getting the win, they would also improve to 6-2. And the Werewolves getting the win, they also would improve to 6-2. So in that case, which is likely, where those teams all win and keep pace, that would be a 3-way tie. And I don't believe the Warriors and Werewolves played. Because I was like, that would be a good matchup. So they don't play, which means no one could have beaten, unless Lob City beat both of those teams. Lob City beat the Warriors and the Werewolves, right? They did. So in that scenario, because Lob City was the only team to have played all of them and beat both of them, they would get the 2 seed. So if things hold pat with the record because of the head-to-head tiebreakers, now that would leave the Warriors and the Werewolves. And since they did not play, it would come down to a math equation. So we'd have to figure out some way to make that work for that tiebreaker for the 3 or the 4 seed. In Aidan's case, Sin City's loss would put him at 4-4. The Ozone boys, he can nod his head, beating Bogy Kicks. That would be a yes. Halfway Crooks beating Lincoln 18ers. Well, he wasn't as sure about that one, and I'm right here. So that's hurtful. But all of those teams would be 4-4. And then, here you go, Aidan. So what you get, because the Halfway Crooks did beat both Sin City and the Ozone boys somehow, that would make the Halfway Crooks the 5 seed. So there's the path for the Halfway Crooks to the 5 seed. Right there, which would then have them in a matchup against the Warriors or the Werewolves in the 4-5. So there you go. That's the game plan for the Crooks there. We did it. Thanks, Aidan. You brought it around to the Halfway Crooks to wrap up the show. So it'll be very interesting. We'll break it all down after week 8. And then the first round in the quarterfinals will take place the following Tuesday. I think the only other thing I wanted to, and I'm just going to blow up PJ's spot really quick. When I say I don't want to play a team, PJ, it's not the Halfway Crooks being scared. Damn it. If you listen to the podcast, I'm unbiased, unlike you guys on the low post. Okay. It's like it's a team that's playing well that a good team wouldn't want to play. All right. And that's where it ends. That's where that conversation ends. I get the last word on the post game. They always get the last word on the podcast, and it sucks. But guys, good job, Aidan and Tim. And everybody, thanks for watching the week 7 post game show.